Hey everyone listening, trying to find direction and move with intention. Welcome to Moving with Intention, a podcast by Black Sheep Coaching. We hope the episode you're about to listen to is empowering, insightful, and helpful. We hope you're moving with intention in your life and taking actions, as small as they may be, towards becoming the person you want to be and living the life you want to live. Disclaimer: this podcast may contain discussion of sensitive topics that may trigger some individuals. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast is not a substitute for mental health professionals or resources, and we encourage you to seek those out should you need them. Welcome to Moving with Intention, where today we're going to talk about perfectionism and the notion of perfection and just the mindset around it. Now, I'm a strong believer that perfect doesn't exist, and there is such a thing as perfectly imperfect. Now, I know there's a bit of wordplay and it's pretty nuanced, but I think as human beings, we have to accept that we are imperfect. In various situations, we don't react in an ideal way. Our behavior, our reactions, our judgment, in a lot of moments, those things can be imperfect. And I think when we strive for the notion of perfection, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that, but it comes back to that dopamine and it comes back to whether or not it is attainable. Because I think if we are in the pursuit of perfection and we don't appreciate the pursuit, we're in that reward chasing mode. We're chasing the perfection, which, if history will tell us anything and if our lives will tell us anything, I would garner a bet as to say it doesn't exist. There will always be challenges, there will always be difficulties, there will always be ways that we can seek to be better, in my opinion. And I think there comes a time in our lives where we accept who we are. We have a pretty strong sense of self. We have a strong sense of identity. And we let go of that notion of perfection. And that doesn't mean we stop improving. It doesn't mean we stop bettering ourselves. It doesn't mean we stop learning and growing. But we do so with the mindset of appreciating the pursuit of improvement. And the improvement's nice, of course. And being closer to quote unquote perfect, whatever that definition is nice, in my opinion. But I think it's also nice to just appreciate the steps along the way and the growth that happens along the way. And appreciating the struggle, challenge, discomfort. Appreciating all the things that our society tends to frame as negative because they're difficult. And reframing those things as positives, as catalysts for our growth, as impactful moments for change. And I think when I think about my personal life and trying to uphold this image of perfection and trying to, be my best self and live my best life and trying to keep up with everything around me in society and listening and being so impressionable about what perfection is or where I should be at this point in my life. I feel that notion and mindset in on one hand acts as a motivator, but on another hand can be detrimental to our sense of self and our sense of identity and the way we view ourselves. I think on this journey of mine, and hopefully on yours, that we let go of the idea of perfection. because chasing something that's unattainable, frankly, seems really stupid. I mean, I kind of think about, rabbit chasing a carrot, or, the caricature of, or is it a horse with a carrot in front of it? I don't know exactly what the symbolism is, but I think of that chase of pursuit, that pursuit of happiness and perfection as things that ultimately can be unattainable. I don't think when we talk about a state of happiness that that's a persistent state. And if our goal is to just have a perfect life and be perfectly happy, and I don't know that that's realistic. So I think one concept that's been helpful for me, and one concept I want to put out there, is accepting the idea that we're imperfect. And I think a lot of people on the surface will blindly accept that and say, yeah, that makes sense. Nobody's perfect. But if nobody's perfect, why do we put so much pressure on ourselves to achieve these levels of success that are very rarely achieved in society? Being the very best of the best of the best, having all this wealth and success, and having this life that on the surface seems perfect, or looking at our peers and feeling some sort of envy or jealousy or some sense of failure because we have not achieved what they have. I think when we learn to let go of that, when we learn to let go of like keeping up with the Joneses, and just accept that our life is different, that our path is different, that our journey is different. Could be objectively better, worse, who knows? But we often measure that against the rulers of society. We try to measure ourselves up against these societal images of, and cultural images of, wealth, fame, status, whatever else you want to throw in there. But I think those are the big ones. I think a lot of people battle with the notion of perfectionism. I think people even describe themselves in moments as, I'm a perfectionist. And in some cases that has positive connotation, but I think there is such a thing as that attitude being harmful. I think there is such a thing as good enough. I think sometimes trying to perfect something means we are devoting too much time and energy to it. There's a part of me that thinks about the obsessive master of their craft. And these people are admired in society to some degree. We know that it takes a lot of effort and grit and strength to be extremely good at a particular skill. And I'm not trying to diminish that at all. But I think there can be a point where that pursuit of perfection can turn into obsession. I didn't plan much for this episode, and the conversation's, I think, taking an interesting turn. But I guess the thing I wanted to get across was that we're imperfect, and we can identify areas in which we want to improve. But I also think there is a value and a benefit in accepting that we have achieved a level of success that we strive for, and that we don't wish to pursue it further. I don't see that as failure. I see that level of awareness and recognition as, I'm happy with how this turned out. I'm happy with what I've achieved here, and I'm going to move on. And part of talking about perfection was, the last episode I discussed some of my personal experience in therapy, and part of that was discussing the notion of perfection. And sometimes I even wonder, like, and this is just my personal battles with myself is, I do coaching and I do mentorship and I record this podcast, but I also lean on people for help and support and therapy. And is that hypocritical? Is that, or is that something that devalues what I have to say because he doesn't have it all together? He has issues and challenges. But one thing I've learned to accept is that we don't have to be perfect to help each other. We don't have to have everything figured out to help each other. Because the same way I learn from people who have gone through things that I am now going through, I think there are others that can learn from things we have experienced. I think it's storytelling and sharing and discussion and reading and listening to podcasts. I think there's a wealth of wisdom in the world that now more than ever is so accessible. You can take someone's 50 years of working in an industry and they distill their experience of wisdom into a single book. And I think that's amazing. And personally, I know for myself, I draw a lot of fulfillment and I get a lot of fulfillment through helping others. And I think a lot of people do. In my experience, I know a lot of people who lend a helping hand and who feel fulfilled and useful and like a great resource for somebody, and they get satisfaction out of helping others. So I'd like to put it out there. If you're the kind of person who enjoys helping other people and that brings you fulfillment, do it. We don't have to be perfect to help. We can share our experiences, we can share our wisdom, we can have conversations. We can be that emotional support. We can be a great friend, a great leader, a great parent, a great sibling. And to do so, I don't think we need to be perfect. And I think one of the tenets of being good or great is knowing our flaws, working on ones we need to work on, knowing our strengths and playing to them, and knowing where we've done enough work, knowing where we've put in enough time and energy, and knowing when we can close one chapter of our lives and start the next. I guess in closing this episode, I think if we describe ourselves as perfectionists, in my experience and personally, that's something I've examined within myself and examined whether or not it's been a benefit to me or whether or not it's been a detriment to me. And overall, I think in moments it served me well, and in moments it served me poorly. So, if that's something that you resonate with or relate to, I'd recommend doing some journaling, and you'll hear me mention that a lot as a technique for driving that awareness and self awareness. Do some writing, and I'll offer you some prompts around perfection. How has perfection served me? How would I describe the role of perfection in my life? And hmm, How do I feel about imperfection? And those are just off the top. I don't know what those prompts will lead you to, but I think they're interesting, and I might do some writing on that as well. So, this episode certainly wasn't perfect, but we're going to throw it out into the ether and see what happens. Thanks for listening. I'd like to thank you all for listening. A small reminder that you can find all our links on linktree/blacksheepcoaching. That's linktr.ee/blacksheepcoaching. It would also mean a lot if you could support the podcast by subscribing, liking, sharing, or becoming a patron on Patreon. I hope this episode assisted you in finding direction and moving with intention. And remember that big journeys start with small steps.